You never think something like that will happen to you. I mean, sure, you hear the stories, right? About guys finding out their wives are hooking up with the neighbor or some coworker. But those are always someone else's issues, not yours. That's what I told myself, anyway. Until it wasn't. It all started small, as these things tend to. Suddenly, we were hearing about Marcus all the time. Marcus helped fix the mower today. Or, Marcus trimmed the hedges while you were at work. Just little things like that. At first, I figured he was being a good neighbor, just doing what any decent person would do. I mean, the guy lost his wife a few years ago, and we'd always been friendly enough. But then it started happening more often, and the way Sophia said his name, that's when I started to feel something was off. It was a little too casual. One evening, I was sitting at the dinner table with Liam, our 8-year-old. Sophia was in the kitchen, humming to herself as she cooked. Out of nowhere, Liam says, "Uncle Marcus and Mom have fun when you're not here." And that hit me like a sucker punch to the gut. I managed to keep my face neutral, for Liam's sake. But inside, everything shifted. My heart was racing, and I forced a smile, trying to keep things normal. "What kind of fun, buddy?" I asked, hoping I sounded casual, like it was no big deal. He shrugged and stuffed his mouth with spaghetti, like games and stuff. They laugh a lot. At first, I tried to brush it off. Kids say weird things. It wasn't anything criminal, but the way Liam said it, so matter-of-factly, like it was nothing, yeah, that's when the knot in my stomach started tightening. It's amazing how quickly your mind starts putting the pieces together when you start suspecting something. Every little detail suddenly takes on a new significance. I started noticing how Sophia dressed differently, wearing more makeup around the house or clothes that showed more skin than usual. She used to save those looks for date nights, but now, she'd wear them on a random Tuesday afternoon, even when I was at work. And Marcus? His visits weren't just casual drop-bys anymore. One Saturday, I took the day off, hoping to spend some time with the family, and, surprise, Marcus shows up unannounced. He had this awkward look on his face, like he wasn't expecting me to be home. Sophia, of course, put on that fake smile of hers, the kind she uses when she's hiding something. "Hey, Jake," Marcus said, rubbing the back of his neck like a guilty teenager. "Didn't know you'd be home." "Yeah, I bet you didn't," I thought to myself. I looked from him to Sophia, and her cheeks flushed, but she just waved it off like it was no big deal. I should have confronted her right then, asked her why our neighbor was showing up when I wasn't around, but I didn't. I told myself I was overthinking things. Maybe I was reading too much into it, or maybe I just didn't want to admit what was staring me in the face. Still, it wasn't just Marcus dropping by that was bugging me. It was the way Sophia started acting when I was around. She'd put her phone face down on the table whenever I walked into the room. She used to be a lot more open with her phone. If I asked her who she was texting, she'd snap at me, "Nothing you need to worry about." That wasn't like her. It felt like she was guarding something I wasn't meant to know. At night, I'd lie awake beside her, staring at the ceiling while my mind ran wild, imagining every worst-case scenario. I considered confronting her, asking her outright, but every time I did, I chickened out. I wasn't ready to hear whatever she would say. I still wanted to believe everything was fine, that Marcus was just a lonely guy trying to help out, and Sophia was just bored with me being gone so much. But that nagging feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. It was like an itch I couldn't scratch, a quiet voice telling me something wasn't right. One night, after I tucked Liam in bed, I sat on the couch with a beer in hand, scrolling mindlessly through my phone, trying to distract myself. Sophia was in the kitchen, laughing softly as she texted someone. The sound made my nerves jump. "Who's so funny?" I asked, looking up from my phone. Her smile dropped, and she quickly stuffed her phone into her pocket. "Just Olivia from book club," she said, trying to sound casual. But I knew. I didn't say anything, but we both knew I knew. She quickly disappeared upstairs, and I sat there, nursing my beer, feeling like an idiot. The hardest part wasn't the suspicion, it was the doubt. It makes you question everything. Every conversation, every glance, every laugh. And I hated it. I hated that I was starting to doubt my own wife, the woman I thought I knew. But I couldn't stop noticing things. How she smiled more when Marcus was around. How her eyes lit up when his name came up in conversation. I noticed the way they touched each other, those lingering glances. I tried to tell myself I was being paranoid, that I was imagining things, but deep down, I knew better. That night, when Liam made that offhand comment about Mom and Uncle Marcus having fun, that wasn't just kid talk. It was a red flag. I just wasn't ready to admit it to myself yet. And then came Friday afternoon. I wasn't supposed to be home early, but work had been light, so I figured I'd surprise Sophia, take her and Liam out to dinner, do something nice. Things between us had been off for a while now. The tension, the unease, just sat there between us, unspoken but heavy. I wanted to shake it off, convince myself I was overthinking it. But when I pulled into the driveway, I saw Marcus's truck parked outside. My stomach twisted. It didn't feel right. Sure, he was always around, but this time, something was different. I told myself I was being ridiculous. He was just helping again. Maybe he was fixing something. But when I walked up to the front door, the sight of Marcus stepping out of my house, his shirt half unbuttoned, stopped me dead in my tracks. He froze, like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Sophia was standing in the doorway, laughing a little too hard at something. Her laugh sounded forced, like she was trying to cover something up. Every alarm in my head went off at once. Marcus gave me this tight, awkward smile, like he was trying to act normal. "Hey, Jake. Just helping Sophia with some stuff," he mumbled, buttoning up his shirt. "Yeah," I thought, staring him down. "I bet you were." Sophia, with that fake smile plastered on her face, quickly jumped in. "He was just fixing the sink, Jake. You know how it's been leaking." She sounded too cheerful, too tense, like she was bracing for me to call her out. I wanted to say something, anything, but I didn't. I just stood there, jaw tight, as Marcus shuffled off to his truck. Sophia stayed frozen in the doorway, her arms crossed over her chest, pretending like it was all no big deal. That night, everything felt worse than ever. Olivia barely even looked up from her phone during dinner, her attention completely absorbed in whatever was so much more exciting than the rest of us. It was hard not to notice the little smirk she'd get whenever a new message popped up, as if there was some private joke she wasn't sharing with the rest of us. And each time her screen lit up, she'd quickly swipe it out of sight, like she didn't want anyone to see what was going on. My stomach tightened with a feeling I couldn't shake. I kept telling myself I wasn't going to do it. I wasn't going to be that guy, the one who goes digging through his wife's phone to find answers. But I couldn't ignore the feeling in my chest. I had to know. That night, after Sophia had dozed off on the couch, her phone still clutched in her hand, it felt like a sign. She was sound asleep, snoring lightly, completely unaware of what was about to happen. I hesitated for a moment, my heart thudding in my chest like it was about to explode. Then, quietly, I slid the phone from her grasp. Unlocking it was a breeze. Her password was still Liam's birthday, the same one she'd always used. And that's when I saw it. Marcus's name at the top of the messages. My blood ran cold. What followed was a horrifying string of texts. It wasn't just the flirty comments or the plans to meet up. It was the photos. Jesus, the photos. They weren't innocent selfies. They were explicit, full of things I couldn't even wrap my head around. I had never thought she'd send anything like that to anyone but me. My hands started to shake, and I could feel the bile rising in my throat as I scrolled through them. Had a blast today. Can't wait for round 2. Missed the way you kissed me last time. Maybe next time we skip the wine and go straight to dessert. I had to stop. I couldn't take it anymore. It felt like my insides were being ripped out. I sat there for a while, staring at the phone, the weight of it all sinking in. It wasn't just my gut feeling. It wasn't paranoia. This was real. Sophia wasn't just making a mistake or having an affair. She was in love with him. I could hardly breathe, the anger and betrayal wrapping around me like a vice. But I wasn't going to let this slide. If she thought she could pull something like this on me, then she had another thing coming. I snapped a few screenshots, making sure to capture every text, every photo, every little heart emoji. I made a mental note of the dates, times, everything. It felt almost clinical, like I was logging evidence for some kind of case. I didn't even know what I was going to do with it yet, but it was mine, and that gave me a little bit of control back. I wasn't going to be the helpless victim here. The next day, I called up Ian Miller. Ian's the kind of guy who tells it straight. No sugarcoating. He's been through his own mess with divorce, so he doesn't mince words. We met at a bar nearby, and after a couple of drinks, I told him everything. "She's sleeping with the damn neighbor," Ian said in disbelief, his voice low but serious. "Jesus, Jake. That's brutal." "Yeah," I said, swirling my beer around, trying to avoid his eyes. "I saw the texts. They've been sneaking around for a while." Ian shook his head and leaned back in his chair. "You know what to do. File for divorce. Screw her, man. Don't waste any more of your time on someone who clearly doesn't respect you." I knew he was right. Logically, divorce was the obvious step. But logic didn't feel like enough. A simple legal separation wasn't going to do it. I wanted more. I needed her to feel everything I was feeling. The pain, the anger, the betrayal. "I'm not just walking away," I said, my voice sharper than I meant. "She's not getting off that easy." Ian looked at me for a long moment, and then he nodded slowly. "Revenge, huh?" Something like that. I wasn't sure what I had planned just yet, but I wasn't about to be the helpless husband who takes the high road while she gets to do whatever she wants. If Sophia thought she could get away with this, she was in for a rude awakening. That night when I came home, Sophia was already asleep in bed, curled up like everything was still normal. Like she hadn't just destroyed everything we had with a couple of careless, thoughtless texts. I stared at her for what felt like forever, trying to wrap my head around it. How had we gotten here? How had the woman I married, the one I built a life with, turned into someone who felt like a complete stranger? But it didn't matter now. Whatever love I had for her was buried under a mountain of anger. And if she thought I was going to take this lying down, she was wrong. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I wasn't looking for revenge at first. But then I met Abigail Foster, and it was like the universe handed me a chance I couldn't ignore. It all happened by accident. I just pulled into the driveway when I saw her struggling with a huge box, trying to balance it while fumbling for her house keys. Abigail was new to the neighborhood, having just moved in a couple of weeks ago, but we hadn't talked much beyond quick hellos. She looked frustrated, sweat sticking to her forehead, clearly having a hard time. "Need a hand?" I called, walking over to her. She looked up, her expression shifting from annoyance to relief. "Oh God, yes. You'd think I was carrying bricks with how heavy this thing is." I grabbed the box from her, surprised at how light it was. "Got bricks in here?" I joked, finally letting myself smile for the first time in ages. She laughed, a real laugh, not some forced thing. "No, just camera equipment. Photographer stuff. Welcome to my glamorous life." And that's how it started. Simple, innocent. But there was something about Abigail. She was warm, easygoing, and completely different from Sophia, whose every smile these days felt like an effort, every word tense. Helping Abigail carry the box inside felt natural, like we'd known each other forever. We didn't have any awkward pauses or hidden agendas, just two people chatting like old friends. "By the way," she said, wiping her forehead with the back of her hand, "I'm Abigail, and you must be Jake, right?" "Yeah," I nodded. "Nice to finally meet you." She flashed me a grin, one that made her eyes light up. "Thanks for the help, Jake. I owe you one." A couple of days later, she knocked on my door, asking if I could help her with her Wi-Fi. "Tech stuff is definitely not my thing," she admitted, laughing sheepishly. I wasn't about to turn her down. Her place felt different, warmer than mine had in a long time. It wasn't cold and full of tension like my house had become. As I fiddled with the router, she made us both coffee and plopped down on the couch beside me. "You're a lifesaver," she said, handing me a mug. "I've been trying to get this stupid thing working all morning." "No big deal," I shrugged. "Just had to reset a few things." We sat there, sipping coffee, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Relaxed. Abigail was easy to talk to, and her energy was playful and refreshing. "So," she said with a sly smile, "what's your story, Jake? Married? Got kids?" "Yeah," I replied, feeling my throat tighten for a second. "Married. Got a son, Liam. He's 8. Her eyes lit up with curiosity. "What's your wife like?" I hesitated, unsure how to answer. Things had gotten too complicated. I muttered a half-hearted response, and Abigail let out a soft laugh, nudging my arm playfully. The way her fingers brushed against my skin, just for a moment, it threw me off. It wasn't much, but it felt like more warmth than I'd gotten from Sophia in months. From that moment, I started finding any excuse to be around Abigail. I helped her rearrange her furniture, put up some pictures on her walls, even fixed a leaky faucet. And with every task, our hands would brush together. Accidentally, or maybe not so much. There was something between us, a quiet energy that I couldn't ignore. It wasn't just the playful flirting, though that definitely wasn't helping. It was the way she looked at me, like I wasn't just the guy who paid the bills or came home tired at the end of the day. Like I mattered. She saw me. Meanwhile, things with Sophia were only getting worse. She picked up on the changes right away. How I started staying out longer without explaining myself. How I stopped pretending to care about our dead-end conversations. One night, she cornered me in the kitchen. Her arms were crossed, her eyes sharp. "You've been coming home late a lot," she said, her voice cold and accusatory. I leaned against the counter, keeping my expression flat. "Work's been crazy." "Work's been crazy," she shot back, sounding like she didn't believe a word. "You're a financial analyst, Jake. You're not out there saving lives. You don't work round the clock." I shrugged, keeping it casual. "Stuff comes up." I could see her jaw tighten, the frustration simmering just below the surface. "You think I don't notice when you lie to me?" she hissed. "I'm not stupid, Jake." I didn't flinch. "Funny," I said. "That's exactly what I was about to say to you." That threw her off for a moment, but I could tell she was struggling to hold it together. She wasn't blind. She could feel the distance between us, and it was eating her alive. I couldn't help but feel a twisted satisfaction in that. Every time I spent time with Abigail, whether we were fixing a sink or just talking over coffee, it felt like I was slowly reclaiming pieces of myself that Sophia had worn away. And the fact that it was making Sophia uncomfortable, that felt like a small victory. Of course, I wasn't dumb enough to think Abigail was some kind of angel. She was sharp. She knew there was something deeper going on. One evening, as we sat on her porch with beers in hand, she studied me for a moment, then spoke up. "You've got a lot on your mind, don't you?" "Yeah," I admitted, not bothering to hide it. She tilted her head, her eyes softening with understanding. "Ever think about just letting it go? Just saying, screw it, and doing whatever makes you happy for once?" I looked at her, a slow grin pulling at the corners of my mouth. "Maybe I do. But I wasn't talking in general. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I was going to make Sophia feel what I had been feeling for so long. The lies, the secrets, everything she'd stolen from me, and everything she'd taken for granted. And Abigail? She was going to help me do it. Sophia had her fun. Now it was my turn to turn the tables. It was a Thursday when I made up my mind. Time to stop holding back. Time to stop pretending things were still the same. I texted Abigail, asking if she wanted to grab dinner. She replied in seconds. "Thought you'd never ask, winking-faced." I told Sophia I was meeting a buddy for drinks, making sure to act like it was no big deal. She didn't put up much of a fight, but I could see the tension in her eyes, the way her jaw tightened. Let her wonder. Let her stew in it. At the restaurant, Abigail was already there when I walked in. She stood up with a grin, her eyes bright. She was wearing a black dress that hugged her in all the right places, her dark hair falling over one shoulder. The moment she saw me, her face lit up. "Wow," she said with a teasing smile. "You clean up pretty good, Jake." "Not bad yourself," I replied, feeling something in me come alive. We shared a bottle of wine, the conversation flowing effortlessly. With Abigail, it always felt easy. And the flirting? It was shameless. Her foot brushed against mine under the table, and I didn't pull away. By the time dessert came, I knew exactly how the night would end, and I was looking forward to it. When dinner ended, we didn't waste time pretending there was going to be some formal goodbye. The second we stepped into her place, it was like the floodgates opened. All the tension between us finally broke. Clothes came off, hands roamed freely, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was playing second fiddle. I felt wanted. When the night finally ended, we lay in the aftermath, tangled up in each other. Abigail rested her head on my chest, her fingers tracing lazy circles on my skin. "No regrets," she murmured, her voice soft and content. "Not a single one," I whispered back, and I meant every word. The next morning, I drove home with Abigail's perfume lingering on me, subtle but unmistakable. The scent was sweet, with just a hint of spice. It stuck to me like a secret. I didn't change or shower. I wanted Sophia to notice. When I walked in the door, Sophia was waiting for me in the kitchen. Arms folded, eyes narrow. "Where have you been?" she demanded. I breezed past her, not bothering to look her way. But I saw the slight flare of her nostrils as the scent of Abigail's perfume hit her. Her gaze dropped to my collar, where there was a faint smudge of lipstick. I didn't need to look at her to know what was going through her head. She faltered for just a moment, but quickly masked it with a forced smile. "You smell different," she said, her voice laced with suspicion. I shrugged casually. Must have been the cologne at the bar. Some guys overdo it. I could practically feel her seething, but she didn't push it. Not yet. The next few days were a game of cat and mouse. I kept meeting Abigail, and each time, I left just enough evidence for Sophia to find. An unlocked phone with a message from Abigail, a jacket that smelled faintly of her perfume, a text that was left where Sophia couldn't miss it. The first time Sophia found one of the messages, she tried to act casual about it, but I could see right through her. "Who's Abigail?" she asked one evening as I came in late from a work meeting. "A friend," I said, kicking off my shoes and not bothering to look at her. "A friend?" she repeated, her voice rising a little higher, eyes narrowing. "Yep," I answered, deliberately vague. I was enjoying the uncertainty eating away at her. She tried to hold it together, but I knew it wasn't going to last. I knew exactly how to push her buttons, and watching her unravel, piece by piece, was strangely satisfying. One night, I left my phone charging in the living room and caught her snooping through it. She didn't see me standing in the hallway, watching her as she scrolled through the messages between me and Abigail. When she saw the texts, the flirtatious, intimate ones, it was like she physically recoiled. The jealousy, the hurt, the anger, all of it twisted her face into something I almost didn't recognize. She slammed the phone onto the counter, her hands shaking as she realized I was standing there. Her face twisted, shifting from anger to desperation, then to accusation. "So this is what you've been doing," she hissed, her voice venomous. "Running around with some whore behind my back?" I crossed my arms, locking eyes with her, my face blank. "Funny," I said, my voice low and calm. "I was about to ask you the same thing. About Marcus." That knocked the wind out of her. For a moment, she stood there, pale, mouth open but no words coming out. She knew, deep down, she had no right to be angry, not after everything she'd done. But that didn't stop her. "This is different," she stammered, her voice shaking with the effort to hold herself together. "What you're doing, it's even." I cut her off, my tone turning sharp. "Yeah, that's exactly what it is." Liana stood frozen for a beat, hands clenched into fists at her sides. "You're disgusting," she spat, her voice seething. I smiled, cold and unmoved. "Takes one to know one." After that, everything between us hit rock bottom. Every conversation turned into a fight, every word laced with bitterness and resentment. And through it all, I kept seeing Abigail, relishing in every moment of the affair, savoring the sweet, twisted satisfaction it gave me. Sophia tried her best to keep up appearances, but I could see her crumbling. Bit by bit, she was falling apart, and there was nothing she could do about it. She played her game and lost. Now, she had to watch as I played mine, colder, sharper, without a shred of guilt. And the best part? I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. It was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. When you play these kinds of games, it's not about if you'll get caught, it's about when. That morning, it all exploded right there in our front yard. Abigail had stopped by to drop off a lens she'd borrowed from another photographer. Nothing major, just an excuse to see me before her next shoot. We stood outside, leaning against my truck, laughing and chatting like we didn't have a care in the world. I should have felt guilty, but I didn't. I felt free. And then, Sophia came out. The second she saw us, her face contorted with rage, her lips curled, her eyes burning with fury. For a split second, I thought she might actually slap me in front of Abigail. Instead, she stormed over, fists clenched, her voice trembling with anger. "What the hell is this?" she shouted, her gaze flicking between me and Abigail. "This is what you've been doing? Sneaking around with her?" "Morning," I said flatly, as though this was the most normal thing in the world. "Don't morning me, Jake." Sophia snapped, her voice cracking. "Is this what you've been doing? Hiding behind my back with her?" I didn't flinch. "Yeah, that's exactly what I've been doing." Before she could say anything else, I heard the sound of footsteps behind us. Marcus was jogging over from his yard, that same dumb look on his face. The one he always wore when he thought he was the hero in someone else's drama. "Liana, maybe you should calm down," Marcus said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "This isn't your fight, Marcus," I said, my voice colder than ever. "This is between me and my wife, and you? You were never welcome here." Marcus opened his mouth to say something, but nothing came out. He knew exactly what I meant. He gave Sophia one last awkward glance before slinking back to his yard, leaving her standing there with me. Her body was trembling, but it wasn't just from anger. It was something deeper, something darker. "So it's true," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You're cheating on me with her?" I didn't flinch, didn't look away. I just stood there, calm, and said the words I'd been waiting weeks to say. "We're even." Sophia's face collapsed in an instant. All the anger, all the venom that had been building up between us, just dissolved. She looked like a broken shell of the woman I'd once known. Shocked, humiliated. Her legs buckled, and she sank onto the porch step, covering her face with her hands as her shoulders shook with silent sobs. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel an ounce of sympathy for her. Not one bit. When she finally looked up, her eyes were red, swollen with tears. "Please, Jake," she whispered, her voice cracking. "We can fix this. I made a mistake with Marcus. It was stupid. It didn't mean anything. I was lonely. You were always working." She trailed off, desperate, broken. "Please, let's start over. We can go to therapy. We can fix this, or it's over." I didn't hesitate. The words came out colder than I expected, but they felt right. "Sophia, no." Her face fell, and new tears welled up in her eyes. "No, it doesn't have to be like this. We can still—" "No," I interrupted. "We can't. I'm done." She knew then that there would be no bargaining, no more lies, no more second chances. I was finished with her. The next day, I called a lawyer, Emma Brooks. She came highly recommended, and for good reason. Straight to the point, sharp, and professional. No wasted words, no softening the blow. She greeted me in her office, a clean, modern space that screamed efficiency. Her hands were folded neatly in front of her, poised as if she already knew what this meeting was about. "So, Mr. Rainey," she began, her voice steady and confident, "what is it that you're hoping for out of this divorce?" "Fast, clean," I said without hesitation. "I don't care about the house. I just want custody of Liam." Emma made a note on her pad, her eyes never leaving mine. "I can make that happen." Her confidence in the process was a small relief, something I hadn't felt in a while. She wasn't there to give me empty promises. She knew what she was doing, and for the first time since everything went down, I felt like I wasn't alone in this. I had someone in my corner. Divorce isn't easy. I knew that, but this was a chapter one was ready to close. I didn't want to waste any more energy on the wreckage of my past. The only thing that mattered was Liam, and everything I was doing now was for him. When I came home later that evening, Sophia was sitting on the couch, staring vacantly at the TV. She didn't even acknowledge me when I walked in. I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her, and then said, "I talked to a lawyer today." She didn't move, but I saw her shoulders sag. There was a sharp intake of breath, as if she'd been holding it in all day. "You really mean it, don't you?" she asked, her voice quiet. "Yeah," I said, barely above a whisper. "I do." The silence that followed wasn't filled with anger or desperation. It was thick, suffocating, like the calm before a storm. And in that silence, I realized something that took me by surprise. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't heartbroken either. I was just done. Done with the lies. Done with the deceit. Done with everything that had once been my marriage. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like I could breathe. And it felt like a weight I didn't even know I was carrying had finally lifted off my chest. The divorce wrapped up quicker than I anticipated. Emma worked fast. She had the papers filed, the hearings scheduled, and before I knew it, I was legally separated from Sophia. It wasn't painless, but it was efficient. The house went to her, just like I'd said. I never cared about it. What mattered to me was that I now had a future that didn't involve her. Liam was with me now, full-time. I had what really mattered. Moving into my new apartment was strange. A relief, yes, but there was also an emptiness that lingered. A space inside me that still felt like it was missing something. The end of a marriage leaves a hole, no matter how fractured that marriage was. It's a strange kind of emptiness, the kind you can't fill with distractions, no matter how hard you try. So I did what I could to fill that space. I threw myself back into old hobbies. I went fishing early in the mornings, the cool air settling around me as I cast my line into the quiet water. It was peaceful in a way. I started hiking again, losing myself in the trails, pushing my body to feel something, anything. I even hit the gym a few times, trying to shed the weight of years of frustration and resentment. Abigail was still in the picture for a while. We saw each other, but I knew it wasn't going to last. What we had wasn't real, not in the way that mattered. She was a distraction, a temporary escape from the chaos in my life. And distractions work for a while, but they don't last. One morning, lying in her bed, staring up at the ceiling, I knew I had to let go. When I told Abigail it was time to stop seeing each other, she smiled, soft and understanding. I was wondering when you'd figure that out, she said, brushing a quick kiss on my cheek. Take care of yourself, Jake. Just like that, she was gone. No drama, no tears, just an amicable goodbye. And I realized that was exactly what I needed. A clean break. Sophia, on the other hand, couldn't let go. She called, texted, and even emailed me. At first, I ignored it all. But when it didn't stop, I blocked her number. I wasn't interested in revisiting the past. I'd spent far too much time drowning in it already. It was time to move forward, no matter what. And then Marcus disappeared. Just like that. No goodbye, no explanation. One day, he was around, and the next, he was gone. I didn't ask questions. Maybe Sophia had become too much for him to deal with, or maybe he just didn't want the mess that came with the aftermath. Either way, it wasn't my problem anymore. She could clean up her own mess. It wasn't until months later, at a mutual friends gathering, that I was thrown another curveball. I was standing by the grill, trying to mind my own business, when Madeline Stone came over and introduced herself. Hey you, Jake, right? Ian mentioned you'd be here. Madeline was different from anyone I'd met in a long time. She wasn't flashy, not trying to impress anyone. She had a quiet warmth about her, an inner strength I couldn't quite place. We started talking, and before I knew it, hours had passed. She told me about her own divorce, how it had changed her, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was dredging up old wounds. Talking to Madeline felt easy, like talking to someone who understood without me having to explain every little thing. We started seeing each other after that. No rush, no drama, just two people taking it one day at a time. Slowly, the walls I'd built around myself began to fall. For the first time since my marriage ended, I felt a glimmer of something real, something that went beyond revenge or distraction. Sophia tried reaching out one last time, but I didn't flinch. I deleted the voicemail without listening to it. There was nothing she could say to change what had been done. The past was behind me, and I wasn't dragging it forward anymore. One morning, I stood by the lake, fishing rod in hand, watching the sunrise over the water. The stillness of it all settled around me, like the world had finally found its balance again. I thought about Sophia, about Marcus, about the anger and bitterness that had once consumed me. Revenge had been sweet in the moment, but it was fleeting, like a firework that burns bright and then leaves you in the dark. What truly set me free wasn't getting back at Sophia. It was letting go. walking away from the wreckage and not looking back. As I stood there, the weight of everything that had come before finally lifted off my shoulders. And for the first time in a long while, I smiled. I felt free, and it felt damn good.